going to air it out down the field. Catch and the touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
Welcome inside the College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. We are just 2 days away now, folks, from the College Football Playoff National Championship game on Monday. Boy, I cannot believe we are finally here after everything we've gone through this college football season, from the delayed starts to the possibility of cancellation, the cancellation of games, postponement of games, COVID-19 protocols, truncated schedules, everything, the works, canceled bowl games, a college football playoff semifinals that nobody seemed to want anyway, and yet here we are, and we're going to get Alabama and Ohio State on Monday. Number 1 Alabama 12-0, and number 3 Ohio State at 7-0. So we're going to dive into all of that today. We'll also go off the beaten path a little bit, but also it's college football related in the sense that Urban Meyer, it might be going to the NFL, of course. We haven't really addressed that in the past couple weeks, but those rumors are heating up for the most part. So we will dive into that as well. And of course, we're going to give you the total breakdown of Ohio State and Alabama. And that's where we'll start. And, of course, I'll give you my pick later in the show to conclude things and our final pick of the season. And, of course, we will recap everything next week as well. Alabama, an 8-point favorite now, but the over-under set at 75.5 going into Monday night down in Miami. We are 35, 38-2 on the season, so unfortunately not going to hit that 500 mark in 2021. But we will see if we can end the season with a win with 2 plays on Monday. So let's get some money back during the national championship. All right, so we'll start with just the game itself, and really I wanted to focus on the quarterback matchup to start things off, just because you look at Justin Fields, and everyone figured Justin Fields is going to be a top-notch NFL quarterback, or at least a high pick in April compared to Mac Jones. Mac Jones, folks, for those who don't know, replaced Tua Tagovailoa at Alabama this season, where no one really expected, or they didn't know what to expect out of Mac Jones. Now, we knew Alabama had plenty of talent going into the season. They had Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, John Mechie, who they thought was going to be good, then turned out to be really, really good, and of course Najee Harris in the backfield. So you figured with that type of offense, Alabama can do a lot of great things. But who's going to be the quarterback? People thought the true freshman, Bryce Young, maybe making an appearance. And then all of a sudden, Mac Jones beats him out because he's been sitting on the bench for a couple years. You know, he sat behind Jalen Hurts and Tua, then just Tua, and now he had a chance to take the starting gig for himself, and sure enough, he takes it and runs with it. Mac Jones was absolutely fantastic this season, and he's really been he's been flawless all season long. I don't necessarily remember a time this season where you looked at Mac Jones and you went, wow, he is kind of struggling. And you could say that about Justin Fields. You could say that Justin Fields struggled a bit this year. Now, again, Ohio State played only 7 total games, including the Big Ten championship game and the college football playoff semifinal against Clemson. And if you take away those 2 games from Mac Jones in the same sort of way, without the SEC championship game and the semifinals, he played 10 games. So really, you only had a 5-game sample size of Justin Fields and a 10-game sample size of Mac Jones. Now, ultimately, of course, Justin Fields is the better quarterback. He's the better prospect going to the NFL for next season. But Mac Jones, no doubt, had the better college season this year, based on the sample size of work and that he really didn't make any mistakes. Fields had 2 games where he really struggled, and that was against Indiana, and I know they wanted a shootout, but he struggled in that one, and then he really, really struggled, really couldn't throw the football that well against Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. So if we just go by what they've done this season, Mac Jones, is the better quarterback, and it was evident that he won the Davey O'Brien Award. He was a Heisman finalist, Mac Jones was. But in the end, this game, when you look at the 2 quarterbacks, I mean, again, this game, as I talked with Rich Quinones on Back Your Play on this very station earlier in the week, I mentioned that this game is going to come down to the trenches it's going to come down to who gets more pressure on the opposing quarterback and who makes fewer mistakes. Because both these teams can score at will, as we saw with Ohio State. They looked like their best selves against Clemson in the semifinals just over a week ago now, when they dismantled the Tigers, put up 49 points. Their defense was all over Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence still played relatively well, but again, the defense was all over him, and Ohio State made far fewer mistakes. And even after Justin Fields took a vicious shot to his ribs, where we thought maybe they were even broken, he still managed to throw 6 touchdowns and nearly threw for 400 yards. So Fields is a monster. Mac Jones also a monster. But again, this game will come down to who makes less mistakes. And now you have to say, all right, can Alabama force Justin Fields into mistakes? And does Ohio State have the ability to force Mac Jones into mistakes? Because Mac Jones, again, I just mentioned this year, he's not made really any mistakes. Sure, he's thrown a couple picks, but if you look at Mac Jones this year, folks, even without Jalen Waddle, who, by the way, might play on Monday, we don't know yet. He's a game-time decision. But Mac Jones, 77% completion percentage, over 4,000 yards, 36 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. You mean to tell me this guy's is going to be going into mistakes? Their top opponents this year, Texas A&M, Florida, and Notre Dame, obviously. No one has forced this Alabama quarterback into mistakes. That is bizarre to me. I mean, there was not one game this year that Mac Jones, that you look at Mac Jones and say, yeah, I'm not so sure. Maybe you have to go to the bullpen and bring in Bryce Young. Now, you really can't say that about Justin Fields either, because C.J. Stroud, an unproven young quarterback behind him, you're obviously going to roll with Fields, even if he's struggling. And plus, Fields was kind of bailed out in the Big Ten championship game with Trey Sermon running for over 300 yards. So this game, on the broad spectrum, is between Fields and Jones. Justin Fields, hot NFL prospect. Mac Jones, one of the stories of the year, who no one thought was going to be this good just because he was sitting behind Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts for his entire college career. Now, I don't know where Mac Jones is going to measure up in terms of his NFL prospects, but in terms of what he does with this Alabama offense and what he's been doing with Alabama all season long. Don't forget, folks, they're still 12-0. They've been steamrolling everybody, and they steamrolled Notre Dame last week. They won, and then they beat Florida in a shootout in the SEC title game a couple weeks prior. So when you look at this as a whole, who's going to make more mistakes? Now, if neither of them really make that many mistakes, it's going to come down to who has the ball last. That's pretty much where we're at with this national championship game, and that's why it's still a little bit more intriguing than a potential Alabama. Now, for me, I would have been intrigued by an Alabama-Clemson national championship game. I know the average fan probably would be sick and tired of it at this point because they've played each other virtually every year now at this point. Already 3 times in the national title game and one other time in the semifinals. They're 2-2 against each other, but in the championship game, Clemson has the 2-1 edge. So you might have liked to see how dominant Alabama is this year going up against Clemson and Trevor Lawrence's swan song. So it stinks to see Trevor Lawrence go off into the sunset, so to speak. Not really, because he lost, but he's headed to the NFL now on a loss in the semifinals. But you get this Alabama-Ohio State game, which is very intriguing because all of the criticism all year was on Ohio State for playing just 5 games. Right, 5 games, and they played 6 going into the playoffs, and they were still granted a playoff spot at the number 3 seed because they won their conference. They were undefeated, but because they had the preseason love going into the year, they were ranked that high anyway. Now, granted, it's not Ohio State's fault. For 2 of those games, they had an 8-game schedule. Now, if they played 8 games and then they won the Big Ten, they were 9-0. Nobody would have batted an eye. Sure, they would have played less than 10 games. I get that, but if they were 9-0. After a Big Ten championship game, no one would have said anything. It's because they played 6, which included the Big Ten title. It wasn't their fault for 2 of those games. 2 of their opponents had to pull out due to COVID issues. Now, 1 game was due to Ohio State's own COVID issues, but again, you can't fully blame Ohio State for 2 of those games and as a whole because the Big Ten was the one conference who initially said, we're not going to play this season back in the summer, and then they came back way too late. The Pac-12 is a different story, but the Big Ten came back in late October, and they gave themselves no margin of error. You couldn't miss a game. If you missed a game, you're not making it up. Other conferences start in September, and if you miss games, you can make those games up. Hence why Alabama, playing just a SEC schedule, and then you include the title game and the playoff game, they've played 12 games and it looks relatively normal. In a normal season, they would have been on their 15th game going into the championship game. So you missed, what? This would be their 13th game? So they've missed 2 games, and they would have been non-conference games. So Alabama played every single game. They managed to play every single game. So this season was so weird, but this game just now goes to show you that Ohio State comes in, and despite playing just 7 games, they are the best. They are one of the 2 best teams in the country. They beat Clemson. I thought Clemson was going to win that game. Don't get me wrong. I thought Ohio State might cover, or actually, I did take Clemson. I take that back. I had Clemson -7, but I thought Ohio State would give them a great game, like last year's semifinal. But it just goes to show you that Ohio State, despite playing so many less games, and despite what Dabo Swinney says about putting them, number 11 in the country because they didn't play 10 games, this is how good Ohio State is. And in the end, I think they are going to be the biggest challenge to Alabama. Now, would have Clemson been a great challenge for Alabama? Sure, but what I believe now, just after watching the Ohio State Clemson game and just seeing what Ohio State can do at their peak, because again, They don't have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, but they do have a Justin Fields. And with the way Trey Sermon is playing right now, he is the best running back in the college football right now. The way he's playing. Najee Harris, of course, would have something to say about that in Alabama, but the way Trey Sermon is playing right now, Ohio State is the best running back in the country over the last couple games. And the fact that Justin Fields has a solid offensive line, and the fact that Chris Olave came back after the Big Ten championship game, my goodness gracious. You're talking about Justin Fields, who is a man on a mission right now, who's being disrespected right now. Everyone forgot how good he was just because he had one great season and then he struggles in 2 games this year in a small sample size. Everyone's ready to write him off. This is how great Justin Fields is. And I believe Justin Fields will end up being the difference maker in this game, good or bad for Ohio State. But don't get me wrong, Alabama is a effing machine, as they like to say. Alabama is a machine. They are a wide receiver factory. They are a offensive and defensive line factory. Najee Harris is a plug-in running back. He is great. Don't get me wrong. But every year Alabama has one of these guys. Every year Alabama has guys like this at wide receiver. Just look at last year. Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. They had Smith and Waddle on the roster last year, and they were the 2 guys behind them. Devontae Smith, don't forget, folks, he's the Heisman Trophy winner. So that's how great he is. And he's the one who caught the game-winning touchdown pass against Georgia for Alabama in their national championship game just 3 years ago. Don't forget that either. Alabama is loaded. Now, do I see Alabama putting up 40-something points? Yeah. Can I see Ohio State doing the same thing and maybe winning this game? I do. I believe Ohio State is the biggest challenge to Alabama. Alabama, a little bit of a leaky defense, so we'll see what happens, what they do against an Ohio State offense that was that explosive against Clemson. Because Clemson had no answer. Once Justin Fields got rolling, Clemson had no answer. And if Ohio State's defense is able to put that much pressure on Mac Jones, it's going to force them to go to the run game a little bit to counteract that. Now, what you saw from Ohio State last week was the ability to cancel out Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne, fantastic running back, going to be a great NFL weapon for somebody down the line. But what you saw from the Ohio State defense, they contained Etienne and made Clemson one-dimensional. And Clemson's like, okay, fine. We have the best quarterback in college football. We'll go one-dimensional if we have to. We'll try to win in a shootout. We'll just air it out. They put up 28 points, one of those touchdowns in garbage time. Clemson had no answer for that because they couldn't stop Ohio State. And Clemson, realistically, probably has a better defense on paper than Alabama. Now, Alabama's playing better right now, don't get me wrong. And they have some stars on that defense, i.e. Patrick Surtain, who's going to be maybe a top 5, top 10 pick. He's one of the defensive backs. So you think Patrick Surtain's going to be covering Chris Olave? He absolutely will be. But can Alabama's defense do what Clemson couldn't do? And that's contain Justin. It was when Justin Fields gets hot, you're not stopping him. But don't forget, he can run too. So can Trevor Lawrence. And as Alabama found out before, and Ohio State found out last year as well. But if Justin Fields gets going and he's healthy enough to play, and you saw what he did in pain last week, now they just had time to recuperate, Fields is ready. And I told you, he's on a mission. Ohio State came up short last year. They were one pass away from winning that game against Clemson in the semifinals, and they would have taken on LSU. Now, granted, no one was beating LSU last year. But you think Justin Fields feels the disrespect a little bit? And I mentioned that before, just a few minutes ago. The disrespect is also coming from these draft analysts, i.e. Todd McShay. Not saying he's totally disrespecting him, but Justin Fields has been universally loved as the second best quarterback in this class behind Lawrence. Now Todd McShay has Justin Fields as the third quarterback, going number 15 overall to the New England Patriots, out of all people, if you could believe that. But he has Zach Wilson going number 4 to the Atlanta Falcons. Interestingly, he has Lawrence going to the Jaguars, and then the Jets taking no quarterback at number 2. But the fact that Zach Wilson, who, by the way, it was great this year, great, and he's been a very solid quarterback for BYU for a couple years, but no one really heard of Zach Wilson on the big stage until this year, because he had a fantastic season. Don't get me wrong, but these late bloomers are all of a sudden taking over the proven commodity in Justin Fields. And again, people are going to criticize me and say, well, Justin Fields had a smaller sample size this year, and he's shown when he struggles, he's not that good. The smaller sample size, don't forget Zach Wilson plays at BYU. He doesn't play in the Big Ten. He doesn't play in the SEC. Trevor Lawrence, he hasn't had his best season was his freshman year. If you take all his seasons in totality, Trevor Lawrence, his best season was his freshman year when they won the national title. Not the past 2 years. He's still great. We haven't knocked him down a peg. We are nitpicking Trevor Lawrence, but we know he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. And when we nitpick Justin Fields, we're saying he's not as good as Zach Wilson. Drop him. Don't think Justin Fields doesn't hear that. He hears that. He won't come out and say it. He's not going to come out and call out Todd McShay ahead of the draft or ahead of the national championship game, saying, "Yeah, well, Todd McShay dropped me from the second best quarterback to the third best quarterback on his mock draft," which in the end means nothing. It's just predictions and it's just talk. He's not going to come out and say that before the game. Say, "Yeah, that's my motivating factor." He could say he's motivated by a lot of outside noise, which could include that, and also the disrespect Ohio State's has been given the entire season for only playing 6 games going into the playoffs. But don't forget, folks, as much as I, will dislike Ohio State on the field, I'm a Rutgers guy. I know I'm a Big Ten guy, and Rutgers would have no shot against Ohio State, by the way. By the way, they scored only 1 less point than Clemson, by the way, just to throw my little Rutgers reference in there. I like the story of Ohio State. If I don't like them on the field when Rutgers goes against them, or if I want to root for Michigan once in a while on the football field against Ohio State, I still love the story of Ohio State because they were a catalyst into bringing back the college football season. So was Justin Fields. So was Trevor Lawrence, by the way, at Clemson. So I don't know how you can't root for this. And now you're going to get a great game because Alabama is this unbeatable machine, and they're back where they should be after missing the playoff last year. And you're thinking, all right, who's going to take him out? And if it's not going to be Clemson, it's Ohio State the team to take him out. Oh, don't forget, Ohio State took out Alabama as the 4th seed in the first ever playoff when Zeke Elliott ran wild. You don't think that can happen again? You're blind. If you don't think that can happen again, you are blind and you're not paying attention. Trey Sermon can do that. He can run wild. Justin Fields can go off. Don't forget who beat Alabama back in the first playoff with Ohio State. Dwayne Haskins. Sorry, I take that back. Cardell Jones. I don't want to say even worse, but Cardell Jones had less of an NFL career than Dwayne Haskins. Cardell Jones, folks. That was only his 3rd start. His 3rd start of his college career. And he beat Alabama. He beat Alabama. I take that back. I take that back. Actually, that was his 2nd start. So he came in relief against Michigan, started the Big Ten championship game, started against Alabama, then started the national championship game against Oregon. Better quarterback, solid running back, great receiver, high-powered offense, motivation, off the disrespect. Do not count out Ohio State. I'm just telling you, this is a great, great matchup. Talk about the quarterbacks all you want, the efficiency and the effectiveness and the machine that is Alabama. Ohio State might just be the team to knock them off. Just you wait. Monday night's going to be so exciting. All right, we're going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we will talk about the Urban Meyer rumors This will be interesting. And we'll incorporate, of course, Trevor Lawrence into that as well. And then we'll discuss more of the national championship game coming up on Monday night later in the show. I'll give you my official pick and play for the over-under as well. Let's keep it locked here. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back to College Football Pick'em right on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. Just a reminder, you can follow me on Twitter at NickKosko59, NickKosko59. Also follow the station at 1490 Sports Bet on Twitter as well for all the latest of all the happenings on this very station with Back Your Play with Rich Quinones and, of course, The Fix with Ryan Rothstein during the week. And great guest lineup all around. NFL playoff talk is all the rage, of course, as we are in Wild Card Weekend today and tomorrow. And, of course, next week we head into the divisional playoffs, so the NFL betting craze is going wild right now. But for right now, we are talking about college football. But we will sprinkle in a little bit of NFL right here, only because Urban Meyer, folks, is the biggest coaching wild card we've seen in a while going into the NFL. If he does. Now, Meyer's been out of the game. He's been out of coaching for a couple of years, and he's never coached in the NFL. But on Friday, he met with the Jacksonville Jaguars. No deal is imminent, but Urban Meyer, it looks to me like he's going to end up being the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach. I'm not going to say stunned yet, but I'd be very surprised if Urban Meyer is not the new Jacksonville Jaguars head coach, because Urban Meyer set his asking price, and I know that there was reports out there that he would want $12 million a year, and it's since been refuted. But that's probably the right range for Urban Meyer to be an NFL head coach. We know his success at Ohio State, at Florida, and of course at Utah and Bowling Green before that. But Urban Meyer, despite having never coached in the NFL, I don't see why this can't be a great fit in Jacksonville. Jacksonville needs something. Now, granted, would Jacksonville do a smart thing and hire a guy like maybe Eric Bieniemy, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator? That'd be a very smart move. Or maybe a Brian Dable from Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. Would that be a smart way to go for the Jaguars, considering they do have the number one overall pick? And we mentioned Trevor Lawrence before. Trevor Lawrence is probably going to be the number one overall pick, and he's going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar. And at least for their sake, they would love to hope for the next at least 10 years, next decade, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the quarterback down in Florida. Urban Meyer's a Florida guy. We know this, obviously. He coached the Florida Gators for a long time, and he was a two-time national champion head coach there. He coached Tim Tebow. If Urban Meyer can coach Tim Tebow, and again, I'm a big Tim Tebow fan, but if Urban Meyer can coach Tim Tebow to success in that college system, and despite the fact that Tebow was not a good NFL quarterback, you think Urban Meyer would love to coach Trevor Lawrence? I think so. Here's the difference, and here's where the criticism comes in about Urban Meyer and the NFL. People are going to say, well, his philosophies work in college because it's young men that are developing into pros, young men that are developing into fully grown adults post-college, right? That's where it works in college for Urban Meyer. He's able to recruit. He's able to go into these players' homes and tell their parents, work the parents, put them into a space where he's going to have them for 2 to 4 years, 3 to 4 years, however it may be. But then it's a constant rotation. The NFL is a bit of a different animal. Now, college has morphed into almost NFL free agency at this point with the transfer portal, so you're basically dealing with the same things. But now Urban Meyer would have to deal with actual professionals, paid professionals. That's not college. I get all that. But Urban Meyer's a good coach for a reason. He's a great coach for a reason. He wins everywhere, and I believe he was 83-9 at Ohio State, by the way. just throwing out there, 83-9. The guy coached almost 100 games, and he almost won 90% of his games at just one school. Urban Meyer has a ridiculous career record. I have to look up the exact number again. But when you look at what he brings to the table, he brings up offense, right? He is a great offensive mind. He's coached many great quarterbacks. I mean, going back to, again, it's crazy that he's a great offensive mind, and yet in college, when he played for Cincinnati, back in the mid '80s. He was actually a defensive back. Can you believe that? He was a defensive back, but he's a great offensive mind. His ability to just energize. Now, granted, Urban Meyer at the NFL level would bring in a load of assistants. I'm sure he'd have some say on personnel because Urban Meyer he's that recruiter type of guy, right? When these college coaches come into the NFL, they saw that recruiting prowess, so they have the ability to maybe make a quick impact on the NFL, especially in the draft or with some young players, because they know him. Particularly Urban Meyer, who's been away from the game since 2018. So the past couple of years, he's been able to work in the on the broadcasts and obviously in the TV studio, and really get a different. He gets more of a broader look. He gets a broad look at the landscape of college football, maybe even the landscape of the NFL as well. Because again, he's talking about it. He's analyzing. He's not actually coaching. He's not worried about Ohio State. He's not worried about Florida. He's not worried about Utah, wherever the case may be. He's not worried about trying to win a national championship. He's observing everything. He's breaking down film. I mean, he is taking in so much knowledge, and I mean, at least to me, the way Urban Meyer's been able. I mean, again, we've seen it before where he stepped away from the game. Remember, after 2010, he stepped away from Florida, and then he comes back 2 years later. He coaches Ohio State. He stepped away for health reasons. Now, those are very real, but we know this. Urban Meyer, when he steps away and he has some time to breathe, he comes back re-energized. And if there's one place where I think he is going to be, a place where he's going to be re-energized and a brand new challenge, he loves these challenges. So why not go to the NFL for the first time and see what you can do at the pro level with, again, a guy like Trevor Lawrence? Now, granted, I think this is the only way Meyer takes this job. If Meyer takes this job, it's pretty much a shoo-in for Lawrence to go to Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think Urban Meyer would play the Ohio State card and draft Justin Fields number 1 overall. Now, if Ryan Day was actually poached from Ohio State and went to the NFL, I think there's no doubt in my mind he would just take Justin Fields. He would not take Trevor Lawrence. Now, people would say, well, if he's smart and do the logical thing, he'll take Trevor Lawrence because he's a better quarterback. But Ryan Day knows how to work with Justin Fields. You don't think he would want to continue that into the NFL? Come on. But I don't think Urban Meyer would do something like that. He would take the best available player, and that is Trevor Lawrence. But it's a great fit because so step away from the field for a second. If you're Jacksonville, wouldn't you? I mean, again, Eric Bieniemy, Brian Dable, probably a great hire. A smart hire for them offensively, especially if you're going to draft Lawrence anyway. And we've seen what Bieniemy's been able to do from the Andy Reid coaching philosophy with Patrick Mahomes. Brian Dable, obviously, he's magically fixed Josh Allen he made him into an MVP candidate. Josh Allen always had a big arm, a good runner for a quarterback. Again, I mentioned that I have to mention the huge arm twice, but wildly inaccurate, right? Like not as accurate as you want him to be. And now Josh Allen was a borderline MVP candidate this year, and the Bills won the division, and they're in the playoffs. They're the number 2 seed. So go figure. So yeah, bringing one of those two guys in would definitely serve Trevor Lawrence well. And of course, they would bring in their own assistants that have the same philosophy. And it seems like Trevor Lawrence would be a type of guy. He's big bodied. He can move around. Maybe like a Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to be. I don't think he's as athletic in terms of where he just makes these absurd throws. Lawrence is more of that prototypical quarterback where you see, the guys like Andrew Luck, a John Elway, a Peyton Manning. This is a guy who's a field general. Mahomes is like that, has developed into that, but he's a wild man. He's a magician almost, as we've seen on the field. So if one of these guys can turn Lawrence into that prototypical NFL quarterback, Jacksonville's going to have a lot of success. But Urban Meyer knows how to do that. Urban Meyer is one of the biggest motivators that we've seen in a long time. We've seen what he does at these programs. You could almost treat Jacksonville like a program. And again, him coming in with Trevor Lawrence, this just means that's big money. That's ticket sales. That's attention. That's something positive for Jacksonville. You mean to tell me if Urban Meyer becomes the head coach and he drafts Trevor Lawrence, and then they have whatever staff they have in place, you don't think Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence are going to be there for at least 5 years? At least 5. They're going to get that's the honeymoon period, folks, for Jacksonville is 5 years to be able to work the magic. They're going to give Urban Meyer a long leash in the NFL. Otherwise, you bring in a guy like Eric Bieniemy or Brian Dable, the guys who've been in the NFL for a while. From a marketing standpoint, it's weird to look at it like this, but from those two guys, I mean, we've seen what Jacksonville does with head coaches. I mean, Doug Marrone, take him for example. They're ready to shoot him at the door. He went to an AFC Championship game with this team. Basically a different Jacksonville team at that point a couple years ago, back in 2017. But look how the mighty have fallen. You don't think if Jacksonville says, "Oh, we just drafted Trevor Lawrence and Bieniemy or Dable's a quarterback guru, we expect instant success." With Urban Meyer, you can expect instant success, but he's never coached in the NFL before, so you give him a little bit of a grace period. And maybe by year 3, year 4, you start expecting, all right, let's get to the playoffs here at least. Let's make some noise because you have a generational quarterback, and you have a coach who is supposedly one of the best program builders we've ever seen. Granted, that was in college, but in the NFL, I think Urban Meyer makes a huge impact because of the way he inspires his players. And again, I mentioned the paid professionals angle before, but Urban Meyer, the way he just gets the players, the way he speaks, the way his football IQ is off the charts. We know this. This is why he's been a great head coach. He's going to be a Hall of Fame coach in college football. Now, is he going to be a Hall of Fame coach in the NFL? I mean, come on, he didn't even take the job yet. But apparently, he's been the top guy on their wish list. It's his job if he wants it, and I think it's a wise investment. Why not? You need a spark in Jacksonville. If you do so, you bring in Urban Meyer, you bring in Trevor Lawrence, you're going to start selling out every single game. Maybe the talk to London just stops, and Jacksonville becomes a marketable franchise, and people start paying attention. Here's where you can attract free agents. Urban Meyer does more. I mean, don't get me wrong. Bieniemy, Dable, great coaches, but they're only going to attract those free agents. They're only going to attract the appeal. They're only going to bring up that appeal of Jacksonville if they start winning. But what if there's 2 years they don't make the playoffs and they went let's say 6-10 and then maybe 8-8 the first 2 years. Now there's going to be pressure on them to win. Urban Meyer comes in immediately. You could have a Pete Carroll situation. Pete Carroll's an interesting example because he obviously coached in the NFL before going back to college. Before he coached USC. But when he came back to Seattle, when he came back to the NFL and coached Seattle, the guy won a Super Bowl within 3 years. His third season, he won a Super Bowl. I believe it was 2011 he got hired by the Seahawks. I'm going to double check that, but he won a Super Bowl just a couple years later. They also drafted the right quarterback. Don't get me wrong. They got Russell Wilson. 2010. So 2010 he became the head coach, and then in 2013 they won a Super Bowl. I'm not saying Urban Meyer can do that with Jacksonville, but he can have a similar impact. Bring in a coach like that who's a motivator, big-time recruiter, can make that destination attractive to free agents. Maybe has a better grasp for the college game at the moment because he's been paying attention to it so much, and he just takes that that recruiting angle to the draft immediately. And maybe they hit on a lot of draft picks. That's basically what Seattle did. They hit on a lot of draft picks early on in Carroll's tenure, and they've been able to have sustained success. Of course, they won a Super Bowl, went to another one, and they've been a regular playoff team, and they've been a regular NFC West winner. AFC South, it's not a world-beating division. I get Indianapolis and Jacksonville, Indianapolis and Tennessee are great this year, are really good this year. But Houston, we see what happened to Houston this year. Houston's a mess. Deshaun Watson wants out all of a sudden. The Colts, you don't know what's going to happen post-Phillip Rivers, whether it be after this year or after 2 years from now. In Tennessee, this is the second straight year, so if you're Jacksonville, what are you really contending with? If you bring in a big name like that, all of a sudden, there's pressure on the other franchises in that division to make a similar big splash, whether it be for a coach, whether it be for a player, or just some kind of move to keep up with now Jacksonville, where nobody expected that. So there's just a lot of positives to me to bring in Urban Meyer, because he's going to trade. He's going to take Trevor Lawrence. I'd be shocked if he doesn't. At that point, Jacksonville now has this mystique about them because it's Urban Meyer. The record speaks for itself, folks. Urban Meyer's record speaks for itself. 187-32. I know it's college. I get it. Not all college coaches work out in the... Look how great Nick Saban is. Nick Saban is arguably the greatest college coach of all time. Look at him. He had a 2-year stint in Miami. Didn't work out at all. But guess what? He chose the wrong quarterback. Imagine if Nick Saban chose Drew Brees. Now, would Brees be as great with the Dolphins? Would Nick Saban still be coaching the Miami Dolphins? It's tough to say, obviously. You can't go back that. You can't go back that far. We're talking about 15 years ago now at this point, almost. That's something you really can't predict. That's all just opinion at that point. But he got the wrong quarterback. He took Dante Culpepper instead. If Urban Meyer believes Trevor Lawrence is the right quarterback, they're going to win. As I mentioned, folks, Urban Meyer went with Tim Tebow. Again, it was in college, but if Urban Meyer was coaching Tim Tebow in the NFL, Tim Tebow might still be an average quarterback playing in the NFL right now. Urban Meyer has this way of just getting the best out of his players, and he's dealing with professionals. I get that they're paid. These aren't college kids that I'm not gonna say manipulate, but they're not college kids that you can take under your wing, so to speak. Now he can do that with young players in the NFL who are making far less money. The veterans might not want to hear the college spiel, but they'll at least listen to Urban Meyer. He has this pedigree and mystique about him. But don't forget, the guy's won 3 national championship games, 2 with Florida, 1 with Ohio State. So he's won in 2 different places. He's won everywhere he's gone, by the way. Bowling Green, 17-6. Utah, he was 22-2. Don't forget that undefeated season in 2004. 65-15 with Florida. And as I mentioned before, 83-9 with Ohio State. The guy just wins. Small program, moderate program, huge program, huge program. He wins everywhere. Why not take a chance if you're Jacksonville? Why not? And of course, the latest reports suggest that he met with the Jaguars on Friday, so it's going to be more of a developing situation. Of course, the Jaguars are doing their homework on all the head coaching candidates, but it just seems to be that this is meant to happen because he'd be in the right spot. Now, I know the Chargers have expressed interest in Urban Meyer, and he would have an established quarterback already, it seems like, in Justin Herbert, who threw 31 touchdowns as a rookie and over 4,000 yards. That'd be a great situation because they have some talent over there. Jacksonville a little bit more of a barren wasteland in terms of talent because that 2017 AFC Championship team is out the window. But Urban Meyer in Jacksonville is this would just create such a intriguing storyline and would just add more juice to that market. And I think Jacksonville ultimately, I think Jacksonville wants that over everything. At least in the immediacy, they want that juice with Meyer and Trevor Lawrence. Don't forget, the Jaguars already did interview Bieniemy. They also interviewed Raheem Morris and Robert Saleh. Morris is the interim head coach over with the Falcons, and then Robert Saleh, of course, is that defensive coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers. Quality candidates. But Urban Meyer, the mystique, the program building, the recruiting, the knowledge of the college game as it is right now, the ability to work with Trevor Lawrence. If you ask Trevor Lawrence today who he would love to be coached by, he would say anybody, but deep down he would say, "Wow, wouldn't it be something if I go from from Dabo Swinney, who's a tremendous program builder and at Clemson, and I go to Urban Meyer, who's done it all at the college level, and now we take on this challenge together." Oh, and then can you imagine when they win that first game in Jacksonville with Meyer and Lawrence as the duo? Jacksonville is going to be the talk of the NFL. Schefter, Adam Schefter said this the other day. He's more in the camp of, from what he's hearing, that Meyer is still kind of weighing his options. Obviously, the health has something to do with it. His family, he's got a lot of options to weigh there. But even a guy like Colin Cowherd over Fox Sports, he was, at least from what people told him, that Meyer was basically already offered the job, and it's his if he wants it. Meyer's a rock star. That's what he is. Urban Meyer is an absolute rock star. Him and Trevor Lawrence is just gold. It prints money. I'm telling you that you can't deny the effect of what Meyer and Lawrence can do together in terms of juice. That attracts free agents. If you have a man with a plan, which is Urban Meyer, a potential generational quarterback in Lawrence, who's been praised to the high heavens by anybody in the NFL, he's only nitpicked at this point. Take a year or two to really develop him, give him the Urban Meyer treatment. Free agents start rolling in to Jacksonville. Don't forget, it's still Florida, Sunshine State. No state income tax. It's still Florida, folks. It's not Miami. It's not even Tampa Bay. It's still Jacksonville. No offense to Jacksonville. That's the way the Jaguars franchise has been for years. But this is a team that had Blake Bortles and a great defense just a couple years ago, and they almost beat the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game. You mean to tell me Urban Meyer can't lead Trevor Lawrence and a solid team all around to a Super Bowl one day? I'll believe it when I see it, but you're out of your mind if you think it's not. If it's not that's their best chance. If you tell me that's not their best chance, then you're out of your mind. That's their best chance if Jacksonville wants to get some glory into that NFL franchise. All right, we're going to step aside, take another quick break. On the other side, we'll break down a little bit more of the Alabama-Ohio State National Championship game, and I'll give you my final pick of the season. Also, a play on the over-under as well. Keep it locked here. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Final segment of the show right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. It's College Football Pick'em presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at NickKosko59, NickKosko59, and of course, follow the station at 1490 Sports Bet as well. Well, Alabama, Ohio State, Monday evening down in Miami. We've talked about the game ad nauseum. We talked about even Urban Meyer leaving college or leaving the retirement from college football to go into the NFL as well. So let's get back into the nitty-gritty of the Alabama-Ohio State matchup. And before I reveal my pick, before we end the show, of course, there is, I mentioned the quarterback battle, between Justin Fields and Mac Jones. Of course, the key matchup, or excuse me, the X factor of Trey Sermon for Ohio State as well. Can he pull off Zeke Elliott? This time around, he's been so hot, Trey Sermon, the past two games against Clemson and Northwestern. He basically carried Ohio State to their Big Ten title victory over the Wildcats a couple weeks ago. But there's one thing that we're not talking about, and I briefly mentioned it at the start of the show, and it's going to be a game-time decision for the Crimson Tide, and that's Jalen Waddle. Now, we understand how great Alabama's offense is with Mac Jones pulling the trigger, Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner, catching the football, John Mechie on the other side, of course, and you have Najee Harris in the backfield, who, by the way, has scored 24 touchdowns on the ground this season. That's just absurd. But the X factor for Alabama at this point is Jalen Waddle. We know how good Jalen Waddle is. The guy was a machine before his ankle injury that you figured, okay, if he's going to be out, who's going to step up? Naturally, Devontae Smith stepped up valiantly and won a Heisman Trophy, but just people forget how great Jalen Waddle was at the start of the season. He only had 25 catches through 5 games. That's fine, less than half their season. So, if you extrapolate that over 10 games, the guy was on pace for over 1,000 yards on just 50 catches. Waddle was averaging 22.3 yards a catch. He had 25 catches and he had 4 touchdowns. So nearly a fifth of his catches were touchdowns. Waddle is a machine. He only returned 2 punts this year, by the way, for 13 yards, and he did get hurt on one of them. He's a dangerous return man, and obviously if he plays in the national championship game, I would assume he's not going to return kicks. Maybe they're going to keep Devontae Smith back there or use other guys in the game. And the biggest question is, if Waddle is activated and he plays, how much does he play? Is he a decoy? Or if he plays, is he full go? I would imagine if he's good enough to play after having surgery, rehabbing, recovering, practicing, then Nick Saban is going to have him go as full go as possible. Now, again, it'd be his first game back, and it's a high pressure situation. But if Waddle is back, it's just another weapon you have to worry about. Is the line going to change late? But right before kickoff, that's my biggest concern now. Because if Waddle plays, I think he's definitely going to have an impact. Whether he's a decoy or he actually is targeted a lot, he is someone Ohio State is going to have to worry about if he's on the field. Because if he's on the field, Nick Saban's not going to let him play. And again, this is not the pros. This is college. If Nick Saban's going to let him play, he's out there for a reason. He's going to either grab the attention of the defense, and he'll be able to make a few plays. Nick Saban's not just going to put him out there as a sole decoy for the entire game, because then eventually they're going to stop paying attention to him, and they can leave him. They can leave man-to-man coverage on Waddle and have success. Ohio State can. So right now, Alabama is a 8-point favorite, right? Over-runners at 75.5. And spoiler alert, I'm going to take the over, by the way. I do see a 42-35 type of game, maybe a 42-38 type of game on Monday night, so that over is just going to go over. We'll probably hit around the 80-point mark, so I will take the over of 75.5. But the line right now is -8 Alabama. It opened up at 7. With Waddle in there, do people start putting more money on Alabama to make that line get bigger? Is Waddle worth a half a point, maybe even a point, because of how good he is? And again, he hasn't played in a couple months. The guy did fracture an ankle. Don't forget. So he's not going to be. He's definitely not 100% playing, but he's good enough to play if he does play, of course. The fact that he's a game time decision is just a big tease to me that they're just waiting to announce it. So Ohio State has to worry about it, but they leave that unknown factor in there. So I think Waddle is going to end up playing for the Crimson Tide on Monday, and I would not be shocked if they try to go to him early just to keep Ohio State honest. And then they're going to be worrying about Waddle, and they're going to say, oh yeah, they have the Heisman Trophy winner lined up on the opposite side of the field as well. So I think Waddle does make a big impact, at least in terms of the game. In terms of the line, I think Waddle might actually be worth a half a point. I would not be surprised if that line goes from 8 to 8.5 on Monday just before kickoff, as people are trying to get those bets in. So take Ohio State while you have them now. I think that line, if you want to take Ohio State and you think that they are going to lose, but they are going to cover, you might want to try to hold that as long as possible until they announce Waddle's status. Because if he doesn't play, it's going to stay at 8, and then you can just take the 8 if you want Ohio State. But if he does play, I'm telling you, I think it's worth half a point, if not a full point. They might bump it up. He's that good. I really think he's worth at least half a point, at least half. And that line might go to 8.5. And if you're Ohio State, if you're betting on Ohio State, it might be a little bit more enticing to take the Buckeyes. Waddle is that important to that Alabama offense. And again, it just gives them another option. And all of a sudden you have Jones throwing to Smith, Waddle, Mechie. And God forbid, if Waddle plays, people are going to forget about it. They're going to do Ohio State's going to do whatever they can to cover Devontae Smith. It's going to be tough. Sean Wade's going to be on him a lot. We'll see how that matchup plays out. It's a good one to watch out for, but Sean Wade has looked elite. He's also struggled at times in the past couple of years. There are some games where he's gotten exposed, but he has that elite talent for the NFL, but he's been exposed a couple times against top-tier receivers. So that one's going to be a very interesting matchup. But if you have Waddle out there, Sean Wade's going to be worried about Devontae Smith. You're going to have to worry about the rest of the younger secondary for Ohio State going up against Waddle, and all of a sudden you're going to forget about John Mechie, who's going to be playing primarily in the slot at that point. And you still have Najee Harris running the football, so Ohio State's run defense is going to have to show up again. Linebackers are going to have to attack, and they're going to have to make them one-dimensional so they can have a better time covering those three superstars at wide receiver. Smith and Waddle are NFL receivers. Mechie probably will be an NFL receiver as well. He'll be back next year, but you'll see Smith and Waddle go to the NFL. These guys are probably first-round wide receivers. Waddle probably borderline first round at this point, just because of the injury. So that half a point could come into play. I believe so. All right, it is time, and I'm going to give you my pick for the game. Line, I already gave you the over-under. I'm taking the over at 75.5. Line at 8. I told Rich on Wednesday, if you were listening during Back Your Play, during my little segment, I am going with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I was leaning towards Alabama when it opened up at 7, but now that it is at 8, as I mentioned, I think this is going to be a 42-35 type of game, 42-38. I say Alabama still wins. I'm in kind of a similar mode as I was the other week with Ohio State and Clemson, where I thought Ohio State would make it close in a great game, but Clemson would pull away in the end and cover. A little similar, but I think Ohio State is going to cover this one, just not win. I can't rule them out winning, but my head just tells me, my gut feeling is that Alabama is going to win this game. So how much are they going to win by? That's where I'm at. That's how I deciphered it, and I figured to myself, if Ohio State plays like they did last week, which I think they will, this is going to be a great game, epic game, close game. But I think Alabama is going to do enough in the end to win. So I will take Ohio State plus 8. If it was at 7, I would still be inclined to take Alabama. Because again, at 42-35, where I think the score is going to be. I think Alabama is going to win 42-35. It's going to be touchdown after touchdown, and it might come down to the last possession. So I say Bama wins 42-35. If it was at 7, I would have taken Alabama the points with the hope that they get an extra score snuck in there somewhere. But I'm going to roll with Ohio State. That extra point that after the opening line gave me the judgment call to go with the Buckeyes. So I'm going with Ohio State +8 and the over at 75.5 for Monday night's national championship game. All right, that is going to do it for me. Enjoy the game on Monday night, folks. Final college football game of the season. We will be back next Saturday to break it all down, how it happened, and look into the future for both those two teams, and also maybe talk a little bit about the NFL draft as well based on those performances. So we will react to it all next Saturday right here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Today's show, of course, always presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. We will see you next week. Enjoy the national championship and hammer down Ohio State +8.